Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 193, recorded on March 14th, 2012. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Wallenrith.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And we're all here. We're all in our normal places, I believe. I'm at the office / studio. It's still not really put together anything different than it used to be, but that doesn't mean we're not going to take you through a week's worth of news and rumors and speculation on everything PC hardware and gaming hardware. We've actually got a few things to get into. Actually, what's interesting is we got a lot of news this week and not a lot of reviews. We had a handful of reviews. We had a review of a rack mount power supply, if you're interested in that. We had a story about the South by Southwest that Steve put up for us, if you're interested in that. But the main kind of things we went over this week were a couple of notebooks, actually. The first one, maybe not as interesting as we had hoped and that some of you guys might hope. The HP DM4T Beats Edition notebook. So you know it's going to be cool because it says Beats Edition right in the name. You can look through the review here. Matt Smith did this article for us. Of course, our mobile guy. It is it's a Sandy Bridge notebook, integrated Intel HD graphics, no discrete graphics. It does have 6 gigs of memory. It's got a 32 gig SSD and 500 gigs standard hard drive, 14-inch 16 by 9 resolution screen. There's nothing really outstanding here. Matt had a pretty significant problem with this. Basically, the audio system doesn't really sound much better or different than the base model of the DM4, the base HP notebook based on this platform. And as it turns out, there's no difference in performance. That it's also significantly more expensive than the regular machine. Like we're talking about, the laptop starts at $579 for the normal DM4T, but our review unit wasn't priced at $579. It's priced at $1169. The addition of a Beats Audio logo and a unique color scheme can't seem to justify the price gap. I guess that's not really surprising, right?
Maybe Dre left a little something extra special for you inside the chassis. So did you take it apart?
No, I guess that would explain a lot of the extra.
That's worth all the money in the world.
Yeah,
a little piece of Dre,
so to speak, as opposed to just a little Dre. I think the more interesting laptop that we looked at is definitely an article we put up last night. It is an Acer. What is it? It has a long name. Acer Aspire Timeline Ultra M3. And Acer Aspire and the Timeline series have been around for a little while. What's interesting about this particular laptop is that it actually has a NVIDIA GT 640M graphics chip in it. Now, can anybody tell me what a GT 640M actually is?
Not a clue.
It couldn't be Kepler, could it?
No.
No.
Oh, yeah, it is. Kepler.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, something that somebody else learned about, but we didn't, so we could talk about somewhat. But maybe
I can talk about what's
somewhere
in the notebook. Yeah, right. Because the reason we were allowed to talk about this particular notebook, this is actually the notebook that Matt received from NVIDIA when we went out to the Editor's Day not too long ago. And it's a Sandy Bridge notebook. It's not an Ivy Bridge or anything like that. So it's for sale as of today in apparently specific parts of Asia, and that is why we were allowed to talk about it. Now, we can't talk about the architecture. We can't talk about the performance differences between Kepler and Fermi. We can't talk about a lot of that kind of stuff that I know a lot of our listeners and a lot of our readers really want to hear. But they did let us talk about the features, or the specifications rather, and performance. Basically, we yell at them enough to say, hey, look, if regular Joe whatever can go onto the store and buy this and then post all these benchmarks in our forums, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to post these same things. If it's for sale, we're gonna write about it. So it's a Core i5 2467M. I'm not sure here. I don't follow the mobile processor SKUs as closely as I should. I'm guessing there's probably 1,000 Sandy Bridge mobile processor SKUs now, based on all the different derivatives I've seen. The graphics is a combination Intel HD 3000, the integrated graphics, and the NVIDIA GT 640M, obviously with Optimus support there, so it'll only really use the discrete GPU when it's necessary for gaming and that kind of stuff. Only 4 gigs of memory, 15. It's a 15-inch screen, but the resolution is 1366 by 768, which is
fat pixels.
Yeah, it's pretty low resolution for a 15.6-inch screen, which is a little bit of a letdown. But the machine does sell for, I think, $730 or something like that, like right around $700, just over $700. And considering it does have the first Kepler GPU in it, that might mean more to some people because of that. But like I said, we weren't allowed to talk about specifics of the architecture. What did they allow us to say? The company claims the new GT640M will be able to provide playable experiences at that resolution, 13 by 7. At high detail settings, and most or all of the titles currently released, like Battlefield 3, Skyrim, Arkham City, they show all run at 30 frames per second or better on the 640M. It does have a gig of memory. The GPU clock is 625 megahertz. The memory clock is 900 megahertz. What's interesting is
364 shaders.
384.
Yeah.
384 shaders. Which, when you compare that to, what is it, the GT540M, so last generation is the Fermi of the same class of GPU, it only had 96 shaders compared to 384, but the old ones ran quite a bit faster. I'm trying to look for that clock speed here. I can't really find it, but clock speeds were higher. The shader count was lower, but the performance is still pretty different from the 640 to the 540. And in fact, the closest kind of performance we were able to test, or Matt was able to test with rather, was the 550M. Yeah, the GT 550M. And considering that it is a higher class card, it's a higher wattage card. You know, if you look at the Battlefield 3 benchmark that we're showing up there right now, it's actually really, really impressive. The 640M beats out the GT 550M by a noticeable margin while using less power, and it's able to fit in an Ultrabook. This Aspire M3 is classified as an Ultrabook in terms of its thinness and battery life and all that kind of stuff. Now, Matt hasn't had enough time to go through the rest of this notebook in terms of the full review, battery life testing, heat testing, all that kind of stuff. So there's still more to see there. But he was able to play Battlefield 3, Skyrim, Deus Ex Human Revolution, Batman Arkham City at high detail settings on this laptop at 1366 by 768 without a problem. And that's pretty impressive. Now, it will be more impressive when we get to actually being able to see battery life results using this as well. But for those people who are kind of really, really itching and eager to get a little bit of hint of Kepler performance numbers, and you want to see stuff other than what maybe is available on the rumor sites that we'll talk about later, or that some other people will talk about later, it's good to see. You know, I think it's obvious that NVIDIA has definitely focused on performance per watt with this architecture more than any other architecture in the past in terms of their GPUs. So it makes sense that they would have this big push into the mobile market where it's, as Jeremy pointed out in a story recently, it's getting harder and harder for a discrete GPU to make sense in a notebook when things like the Ivy Bridge processor and AMD's, what's their next APU
Trinity
architecture? Trinity will be out soon, and those are going to offer very compelling graphics performance options integrated with the processor. And so in order to make it competitive, NVIDIA definitely needed to focus on that performance per watt and make sure they can integrate their GPU into these thermal envelopes that already exist on notebooks. And I think they did a really good job. And as we'll be able to talk about more once the full NDA is lifted, which is not too far from now, we'll be able to talk about some of the other technologies and features that they're utilizing to kind of get that balance in a particular chassis of notebooks there. So it's really interesting stuff. If you want to see more, read all the benchmarks that we posted up there and stuff, go to the website and obviously look it up. It should still be one of the top stories by the time this comes out. The NVIDIA GeForce GT 640M review. Kepler arrives for mobile. So we got that going for us.
Cool.
I was at GDC / meeting with NVIDIA last week. What did you guys... I don't think we talked about this last week necessarily. The Unreal Engine Samaritan demo running on a single Kepler GPU. This was actually demoed by Epic Games and by NVIDIA, so it's not NDA'd or anything like that. But what was your take on kind of how they talked about, displayed, and discussed this move in performance of the Samaritan demo that we've all seen before.
It seems to me that it's not so much that Kepler is 3 times more powerful than the previous Fermi generation. I think that they've just changed enough things around that for that particular workload, it did very, very well. It was a little bit more efficient. They're able to do better and more interesting things with FXAA rather than, I think the previous version used MSAA. In terms of tessellation, looks like it is a pretty big jump when you start doing tessellation plus shadows, and then using FXAA as the anti-aliasing. I think it looks like Fermi has a pretty big step up from even the previous generation. So it's kind of cool that they're able to run this. And also we've got to think on the software side, the folks that running the Unreal and the folks at Epic have done some work to make it more efficient as well. So it's it's a jump, but it's not this huge jump that everybody was hoping and perhaps expecting. But it's still a nice little jump in performance and capabilities and efficiency, and hopefully we'll see some nice results in current games that we have.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think came over incorrectly when Mark Rain, who's the president at Epic Games, said, it used to take 3 of these, and he held up three GTX 580s to render the Samaritan demo, and now we're doing it on 1 of these, and he held up a Kepler GPU. And if you take it at just that, you're right. You see it as, well, the Kepler GPU is going to be 3 times as fast. But when it really came down to it, it was a combination of hardware improvements and software improvements. So that what's interesting is one of the things that I learned is that this FXAA, this new iteration of FXAA, will be brought to Fermi as well. So you'll still be able to see those improvements. So it's one of those type of things where, it's going to be on Kepler first probably, and you'll be able to get Fermi down the road later if NVIDIA enables it and that kind of stuff. So it's not a true one-to-one comparison, and I would encourage people to not take it as such. That you're not going to get 3 GTX 580s in terms of performance in a single Kepler GPU whenever they are actually released. So I guess before we jump into, we've got a rash of Kepler-based rumors and leaks and all that kind of stuff to talk about, that we should take a quick second, pause here, and thank today's podcast sponsor. All right, thank you for that. Riveting material, everybody. So, as Josh kind of mentioned earlier, I don't really get to talk much about these next handful of stories because I am under NVIDIA's guns in terms of what we're allowed to talk about with Kepler. So I will leave it to you guys to discuss the alleged. Let's start with the alleged NVIDIA GK104 Kepler GTX 670 Ti photo that leaked. Is there anything interesting from this photo other than the fact that it is a fancy new heatsink and new font and that kind of stuff?
It's poorly focused. That whole depth of field effect is way overdone. You just can't see enough. It's kind of interesting. They call it the GTX 670. I haven't heard anything about a GTX 670. The only thing about that I have, I've heard something about GTX 670. It's that they weren't sure how the HD 7970 was going to come out, and so this initial product featuring the GK104, they were thinking about calling it the GTX 670 Ti. So it's a level down from their higher-end 680 version, but then they saw the performance of the the HD 7970 and said, hey, our product matches that. Let's rebrand it, the 680, sell it for a lot more money. Everybody goes home happy. Look at my stock prices. So anyway, it's that looks like it's probably going to be the GTX 680. It's not a big difference from previous versions in terms of aesthetics. The one thing that you should notice is that the back plate has 2 DDI slots plus a display port plus an HDMI, and that kind of leads to some ideas that perhaps maybe NVIDIA will finally have surround gaming on one card, hopefully.
2 displays, 1 card?
3 displays, one
Finally?
card.
Ooh.
Possibly. That's
We
just
hope.
speculation. I haven't heard anything concrete, but with that kind of output setup, you would hope that after, 3 years, middle of 2009, when Eyefinity was introduced, that NVIDIA would finally have products that would support such technology. Jeremy.
All right.
Anything?
So what's next story as well? We can work all these next 3 stories are all involving Kepler rumors and that kind of stuff. So feel free to just kind of mash it all together and talk about what rumors and information are included there, Jeremy.
The next rumor was something that Josh had put up that we saw through a couple of different sites, which was pictures of the GTX 680. And again, we know it's going to be a GK104 based card. You're looking at 1536 CUDA cores, 703 megahertz core, and 1406 megahertz hot clock, which is sort of the big thing about this new generation of card, is that NVIDIA's essentially pegged the general speed your GPU is going to be running at, and perhaps your shader clocks as well, at a certain level. However, if you hit a certain stress level, they're going to hot clock. They're going to go to their maximum, which is, essentially about double what they're going to be coasting at, and stay there until either the scene calms down again and they can downclock themselves, or the TDP hits the point where, hey, this is too hot, we're actually going to have to start stepping down. It's, maybe a little more interesting than what AMD did with their cards, with the various jumps of power. And the fact that, okay, the power will spike up a little bit and then drop back down the second that it can. So it's going to be interesting to see. We haven't really seen exactly what it's going to do, but we've heard that in some tests it's about 10% faster than a 7970, which is pretty nice. Although they did admit that in some cases it's slower. So, as long as NVIDIA can put something out that's going to challenge the 7970, in most applications, in some things it's going to be a little bit better, and some things it's going to be a little bit worse. But finally, AMD is a little bit of a challenge on the graphics part, instead of just being able to set prices at whatever they feel like. We've heard rumors about the prices, but we don't really know. We do kind of know that they've had a lot of problems with TSMC and the 28 nanometer process, so I hope that stocks last, but this could well be a limited edition card whether NVIDIA wants it to be or not.
Yeah, and something else that I'd like to add, and this is something I've heard from a couple of different areas, is that they have gotten rid of the whole hot clock. Now, if you remember back in previous generations, the GPU core runs at like 700 megahertz. Well, the shaders run at what's called the hot clock, which is double the speed, so it runs at 1400 megahertz. Now, in this generation, I have also heard rumors, and I have seen nothing specific except for that Chinese link that we did before that says that there is one unified speed, and it runs at 1000 megahertz, and the turbo core for them runs at 1058. So it's going to be interesting to see which rumor is correct in what this is actually able to do, because I've heard several people from other sites say they've gotten rid of the whole hot clock. They're just having one kind of synchronous GPU like AMD has with their current generation and the previous generations. So it's going to be interesting to hear exactly, but something also to consider, the GTX 640M. It runs at 2 separate clocks. The core is like 403 or something like that, and then the shaders are at 800. So whichever rumor you prefer to believe based on what information we have, again, only one person in this group knows, and he's not saying diddly, not even to me behind closed doors, even though I whisper in his ears and tempt him with jars of Vaseline. So
The sweet nothings of Josh are probably the best thing any of you have never heard. Just gonna lay that out there.
Thanks.
So any other comments or thoughts on GTX 70 Ti, GTX 680 turbo cores, possible GTX 680 specs?
No, we're going to find out soon, I imagine. NVIDIA is a smart company, and I'd heard several months back that their products this time is not going to be like the previous ones. Like you had mentioned, performance per watt is really high on their list of things to do, and we're not going to see a release like the GTX 480, which was pulling nearly 300 watts of power at full speed. This is just not going to be the case with NVIDIA. I think that they've kind of seen the writing on the wall. They know they've got to change the way they do stuff. They just can't introduce these massive dies at the beginning, have absolutely poor yields on them, terrible thermals, and I mean they just were not as competitive as they really needed to be. And even though the Fermi generation was okay, and they refined it with the GTX 500 series, still at the very base level, there were some inefficiencies and some die size issues that they really couldn't get around. So it's interesting to see that they're taking a really new course with this product, and almost you can think back to when AMD went from the the HD 2800 XT with the R600 was a massive, really hot die, and then they wanted to do, they shrunk it, they optimized it with the 3870, and they've kept that with the smaller dies, better thermals from there on out. And it seems that NVIDIA is kind of bought into that as well, and we're seeing the fruits of those labors, if you would.
Oh, I would.
Oh, yes, you will.
Let's talk about something a little bit more exciting. Would you guys like to win prizes? Would you like to win prizes, even if I don't know what those prizes are? It could be anything. It could be
Josh whispering sweet nothings in your ear.
It could be a special a voicemail recording that Josh would record just for you. Or
no.
Yeah, he'll call and he'll leave your voicemail greeting. I just made that
homemade Vaseline.
I just made that up, but I think that's a perfect thing, actually. We're also probably going to give away hardware as well, so keep that in mind. This is all you have to do to enter. All you have to do is enter, join our PC Perspective NCAA 2012 bracket competition. Don't know what that is? Sorry. It's college basketball. It's the largest sporting event in the world. Yeah. Maybe after that whole soccer thing that they have. What's that thing called? The Planet Bowl or something like that. This is more important to us, and by us I mean me, than any other sporting event. So to celebrate and have fun. When are we going
to do the CBI bracket? Serious. College basketball invitational. CBI.
Is that a basketball tournament?
It is. It's one of those you may not have ever heard of. But Wyoming's in there. They're playing right now.
The whole state of Wyoming is in the CBI. So all you have to do, go to the website, look up the NCAA news post that we have here, sign up. It's a CBSSports.com group. The password is PCPer.com. Just keep it to yourself. The fewer people that join, the better chance you have of winning, I guess, is one way of looking at it. But the more people that join, the more fun we'll have. So keep going. I think the deadline is, if you're listening to this podcast Thursday afternoon, it may be too late. So hopefully you're listening to it Thursday morning, or you're watching us live at live.twit.tv and are getting in on the competition now. Enjoy your college basketball, I guess. Let's talk about. Let's make Alan talk about this. He hasn't talked about anything yet. I want to get him active and lively and part of the discussion. Al, tell us a little bit what you would think about the Asus ZenBook line of Ultrabooks updating with Ivy Bridge. Apparently the UX31A and the UX21A coming fairly soon.
Actually, I think it's a pretty good thing. Specifically, some of the other options that they're tacking in there, like I think the backlit keyboard they're adding.
Ooh, that's nice. Yeah,
I think they're changing the style of the keyboard, so it's so there's not so much gap between the keys and the little screen that they sit between, which is actually kind of what I've noticed to be an issue on the one I've been toying around with. Just the keys feel a little sloppy. Like if you hit them on, if you don't hit the key dead center, then it might not register. Right, the key just sort of like, tilts a little bit. It's a little, yeah. But yeah, it looks like a much needed refresh, and it looks like they're checking every box that they need to, for what they should have done initially, honestly. But they have been, Ace has been a little bit shaky on that line specifically. Not only on some of those features like the backlit stuff that people have been asking for and a couple of those other things, but initially they were shipping with, I don't remember which brand it was like the first brand of touchpad they were shipping with.
Yeah.
But it was like they ended up shifting just, on the fly to an Elantec, which is the better one. But whichever one they shipped with initially, like it wouldn't register if you did multi-touch, or if it was registering like single clicks as triple clicks, and it was doing weird things. And it seemed like something that a driver wouldn't necessarily fix either.
Right.
The other weird thing, actually, Jeremy wrote on a couple days back, which was not only were people not sure which touchpad they were going to get for a while, people are still not sure which SSD they're going to get. So that's kind of tricky as well. There's two different options. There's a SanDisk and there's an ADATA. So there's an ADATA right there, which I'm going to be trying now that we finally got it. But I did figure something out. This doesn't help if you're ordering it online, so here's the box for a ZenBook. And then if you look on the corner, you see that?
SanDisk SSD?
It's very faint. It's like a transparent sticker they just stuck on the box. So they are labeling it somehow. But
it's kind of hard to see when you're ordering it online, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And there's nothing identifying it in the part number, model number. It's the same thing. It's just, yeah, it's really confusing. And this is, now, granted, I haven't done the full round of benches yet here, but there's sort of 6 in one, half a dozen in the other with these solid-state drives. They're both the same size, but the SanDisk one is most likely going to not perform as well as the ADATA one being SandForce-based. However, the SandForce ones suck down a lot of power relative to Intel, for example. Like an Intel SSD draws like a couple hundred milliwatts. SanDisk one, or SandForce one draws like 600. So it's like 2 to 3 times the power draw, or in some cases 5 to 6 times, depending on if the drive is active or not. So I'm guessing that a SanDisk one is probably a little more miserly on the power draw, since those are the guys that make all those compact flash cards, and they've been doing the low power kind of mobile solid state drive stuff for a while now. So if it's an Ultrabook, how fast do you really need the SSD to be, given what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
When you run the ZenBook in its like,
hey,
battery
Will
efficiency
I.am
mode.
needs all the performance he can get.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is when you run a ZenBook in power efficiency mode, like the maximum, where you're trying to get 6 to 8 hours out of the battery, it's not speedy, right? The CPU stays in the lowest speed state possible, which is like 800 megahertz. It doesn't bump up to turbo for anything, and the graphics is downclocked even a little bit. So if you're just using it for a typical Ultrabook kind of thing, you're probably not really taxing the storage. So it may not be that great to have that SandForce controller, which at idle draws most likely considerably more power, and it's just sitting there idle, just drawing like half an amp. So
what my favorite additions to this are 2 USB 3.0 ports, micro HDMI, and an SD card reader. But the UX31A will have the option of a 1920 by 1080 resolution IPS display, or a 16 by 90 non-IPS display. And then the X21 will also have the option of a 1080p IPS display. However, the non-IPS will be 1366 by 768. So
So do they call that
display.
the NIPS display?
They do now. They do now.
high
So
res is-
you can
the
get
high res
you can
is
get
good.
1080p IPS or 1920 by or 1600 by 900 NIPS.
What I wonder
For
is if they're gonna open up both ports for that charging thing, like the the current ZenBook, the USB 3 port that's on one side, it's a USB 2 on the other. But
Right.
the USB 3 port is able to do like fast charging even
Yeah.
when the laptop's in standby. Like it can do.
I mean, I don't know,
I think
maybe.
like 1.5 amps or something.
I think
So,
that's going to become a pretty standard thing on USB controllers because Ivy Bridge is going to be based on a new chipset as well that has integrated USB 3.0. So I don't know if the Intel controller has that feature or not yet, to be completely honest with you. So
well, this was
we'll
something
see.
Asus
and
added.
also, what's that?
This was something Asus added on the ZenBook.
Right.
Like you have to install their driver for it to work.
Yeah, that's true. They're probably using the ASMedia controller as well, but whether or not they will once the Intel chipset includes USB 3.0, we'll have to see. Expect those. I guess there's no real kind of time frame here, but according to the rumor, at least, only $1,100 for the X31A starting. So I'm guessing that's not with a 1080p IPS display. So
Going into a different direction, Alan, I've got to ask you this. You have been a big fan of the Intel SATA controller, and especially the Matrix type, RAID stuff.
Yep.
Why are they still only doing 2 ports of SATA 6 on all their chipsets?
I think remember initially they weren't even going to do SATA 6, and then that's what got them in all that hot water with the with what was it, the Z68 chipset, right? Because they sort of tacked it on at the last second, and then they had that whole revision of motherboards where they had to do like recalls and all that other mess. So I think they really walked into Sandy Bridge not even planning on SATA 6, right? They weren't planning a SATA 6 SSD, or at least not a legitimate one, or any of that. And so they just sort of like at the last second stuck it in there, and yeah, I don't know. They're just being stubborn, I guess. I would have hoped you'd get all 6 ports SATA 6, but
Yeah, I mean, AMD has had that for, what, 3 years now? And
yeah. It's
not a great controller, but it's better than what they've done in the past.
Well, I
Of
will
course,
say
you
that
gotta put it with the CPU.
from what I've seen of the boards themselves and like how much throughput you can get from them, I don't think there's enough internal bandwidth to support. If you plug in 6 SATA 6 SSDs into that thing, it's gonna peg it much sooner than you add solid state drives, basically.
Because it's the DMI connection, correct? From the South Bridge to the CPU anyway?
I think it's actually more restricted than that.
Wow.
Yeah, because from what it's almost as if they kept the 6-port logic, like the 3 gigabit 6-port logic there, and they just sort of replaced 2 of those ports with a different channel and SATA 6. Just from what I've seen and how it behaves, like on what was it? What came before Sandy Bridge?
Nehalem?
Linfield?
Nehalem.
Clarkdale?
Yeah,
Oh.
Winfield. Well, and Nehalem for those that, Core i7-920 people.
That was before.
Yeah, but that controller would peg out at about 650 or 700 meg per second. Didn't matter how many drives you had on it. That was just your bottleneck, basically. But what I've seen on the Sandy Bridge is if you use the 4 ports on SATA 3 gigabit, it still pegs out the same way, right? Or right around the same number, like 650, 700. So it's almost acting just like the previous generation motherboard in that respect. But when you put 2 SATA 6 SSDs on those 2 ports, you end up saturating the drives. So you end up pushing almost a gigabyte per second. So it's acting almost as if they were just like, yep, okay, just knock 2 of those ports off and we'll just tack on this other thing. And behavior-wise, I don't know. I haven't seen Ivy Bridge in person, but I would imagine it's probably similar or maybe just a slight rework to that. But yeah, I'm with you, Josh. I really wish they would have done 6 gigabit all the way across.
Bummer.
Yeah, but I mean, most people just have a couple of drives in a RAID. That's as far as they go.
Unless your name is Alan Malventano, and you just buy SSDs and have them coming out of your ears and run them till they just die.
I've killed 3 already. Actually, 4.
You guys are mean to Alan. Don't be mean to Alan.
I kill solid state drives for fun. I killed an IO drive.
It's all right. I kill raids
happy.
for fun, so we've
Yes.
each got something going for us.
Yes, Ryan kills physical hard disks in raids.
It
Right.
doesn't
I only
matter.
kill
It could be,
good
it could be
taste.
optical drive. It could be SSDs as well. I've done that as well. Remember those Western Digital drives? I kill a lot of stuff. Another quick comment here. Lian Li released photos of a piece of a case called the PCQ05. And what's interesting about this is that it uses a kind of newish, still kind of on the verge of coming out form factor that Intel is promoting called Thin Mini ITX. So it's not just Mini ITX, but it's actually lower profile than a standard Mini ITX motherboard. And you'll see Atom-based motherboards based on this, and maybe even Ivy Bridge-based motherboards based on this when we see those released as well. And what's cool about this is that if you look at this case, it only measures. Tim put the measurements in here in millimeters.
So almost that's like slightly larger than a bread box. If you cut the bread box in like a fourth.
if it's really flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really small. It only weighs just over 3 pounds. It still holds 2.5 inch hard drives, available in silver and black. It just looks cool. And if you look at the inside of it, you can see how little space there is for a motherboard. So you get an idea of how thin Mini ITX or how thin Mini ITX is going to be. Obviously, something that's meant for home theater PCs, maybe even super thin clients, use cases, and that kind of stuff. So we'll be seeing a lot more of that type of design, I think, coming by Computex timeframe. Also out and kind of odd. So when you think of Main Gear, they're a system builder, right? And they usually are building high-end systems. We've actually got a Main Gear Shift PC that we're trying to get up tested and reviewed. And these are high-end systems. They do water cooling, they do SLI and crossfire configurations. Well, this week they announced what is this, Jeremy? This is an all-in-one PC called the Solo 21. I'm going to go on a limb and say it's a 21-inch screen.
It is. You might think that it's a tablet. You originally look at it, and this looks like a tablet in pictures. No, it's 15 pounds. It's 17 inches tall, 21 and a bit wide, and it's actually not too bad of a thing, because what you're looking at is either
this
a Core
is a thin
i5
Mini ITX as well. Ha.
Yes,
There you go.
this is thinner than the one you were just talking about. But
Interesting.
it'll either be an i5 or an i3, depending on the model you go with, on an H61 chipset. But it's got a 10-point multi-touch screen. So you could actually have a little bit of fun with this, because
That's pretty good.
10 different fingers. A long time ago, we showed a Star Wars. Well, there's that too, Ryan. But we showed a little Star Wars game which was multi-touch, and they were literally controlling fleets by touching. Now,
Yes,
this was
that's
on a
right,
giant
yeah.
wall screen, not a little one, but this is the same technology behind it. It's multi-touch up to the point of 10 fingers. You could theoretically do multiplayer Angry Birds against each other on it. It's probably one of the more powerful all-in-one PCs that we've seen in a while.
What kind of specs are we talking about?
As I said, it's an i5 or an i3, depending on what you want, up to 65 watts. So you're not going to get the high end, but you should be able to get an HD 3000 chip in there, because that's what the graphics are going to be running off of. So
It
an
does say it's
H61.
upgradable to an Intel Core i7 2600S.
Yeah, you probably have to slap a heatsink on the back of it for that, I would think. But all in all, it's not necessarily top of the line. You've got USB 2.0, not 3.0. You got SATA 2, not
No,
SATA 3.
hold on. I think actually it does say it has 3.0 at some point. I just don't think the ports are blue. It does say it's equipped with 2 USB 3.0 ports and
Good,
2
okay.
additional high current. This is for Alan. Fast charging USB 2.0 ports to keep your mobile devices ready.
Wake
to
up,
go.
Alan.
Main Gear, update your design tech specs, because that's what I was going off of. And you
Yeah,
don't bother listing it.
Yeah.
But HDMI out, eSATA out, DVI out. There's a lot that
SSD
this thing
caching?
can do. Yeah. And it's
It
also
should
got
be.
SSD caching in it. Although it's proprietary from what I can read. As opposed to
It
being,
says featuring Invelo Dataplex software. Is that the same stuff OCZ was using on their Revo hybrid?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
if you're sort of stuck with that, then I prefer not to use that if I can.
Yeah.
It's just because it doesn't really give you much of an advantage for boot time, because it's a driver. It has to
Okay.
load in the Windows side of the environment, so you're still sort of limited
Gotcha.
by your regular drive. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and it's not as elegant of a solution. It's sort of a tack-on thing.
Fair enough.
But
Starting
the
at
bad news is,
$999.
yeah, the
Not too
bad
bad.
news is that.
You think that's high? I mean, for
That's not so
you're getting
bad.
a touch screen.
I mean,
with
starting
the
at.
hardware and, yeah, that's true. I mean, we'll have to see.
You know, i3 2125, 4 gigs of RAM, 500 gig drive. You know, it's about the same price as an Ultrabook, although frankly, kind of looks a little neater.
Yeah, it's an interesting device, and I know the guys over at Main Gear pretty well, and I don't think they would just enter the market if they didn't really think they had something intriguing and interesting and different about it. So maybe we'll be able to get one in to kind of play around with, see if we can get some use case that uses all 10 fingers. Am I right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
There was a game for that came out not too long ago.
Let's talk. I don't know anything about this. I only know the title. Josh, did anybody read about the ARM Cortex M0 Plus?
A little bit. It's
lowest
an
power
ultra
processor ever.
Yeah, and the strange thing is it's made on a 90 nanometer process node. It's not at some 28 nanometer whatever. I mean, this is going to be a very, very basic processor. It's not going to be seen in any phones, nothing, just because it doesn't have the performance for those kind of applications. It's
Right.
going to be used in like machinery and equipment that needs some basic processing to control certain functions that it's going to do, and it's going to be ultra efficient. It's just not going to pull much power at all. It's going to stay very, very cool, but it's going to get the job done. There are multiple manufacturers who will be producing these designs, but yeah, you're not going to see them in any kind of smartphones, tablets, nothing like that. They just are not that type of processor, but doing 9 microamps per megahertz.
Yeah.
That's it's just sipping the juice, even though it's this large process node as compared to the very latest and greatest that we're seeing with these graphics cards.
They're saying use cases for this type of processor would be UPS units, active cabling, and touch screens. So if you think about it, this is the type of chip that would exist in like an active display port to DVI, adapter type of thing. So we're talking very, very low cost, which probably explains the 90 nanometer thing, because that is a process that is perfected and you can get dirt cheap at this point, right? So it's still interesting to think about here's a processor working at 9 microamps. I don't even know how to like picture that in my mind, how to kind of, I don't know. Interesting stuff. It gives you a little bit of an idea of the versatility of the ARM architecture and how it can go from something like that all the way up to, quad core gaming tablets from Tegra and that kind of stuff. So, all right, Jeremy, I put this in here especially for you. This is a post you made about Mech Warrior finally coming to the PC in the form of a free-to-play online game. Now, is this a massive multiplayer game, or is this just an online game?
Not quite massive. It's 12 versus 12. But it's been a long time that I've been waiting for a MechWarrior game. And, I mean, we got MechWarrior Living Legends, which was a nice little Crisis mod. It was never developed as fully as it could be. It's still alive. Don't get me wrong. It is still going. But this is using the Crytek 3 engine. And essentially what it is a giant Solaris 7 arena. So, 3 lances of 4 mechs against 3 lances of 4 mechs. With a semi-persistent world, you can join up with mercenary clans, yada, yada, yada. You can also just, I want to blow up mech now, and go away and play. They've been a little bit smarter about it than they could have been, in that you don't have to take an assault mech and go and blow everything up just to be able to get further. If you play one of the later scout mechs, you're getting the same sort of experience points for scouting terrain for the big guys, for drawing enemies into the Atlas that you got waiting behind the hill. So you can actually upgrade yourself or your character. They haven't really explained quite how it works, but you can upgrade by fulfilling a role. The
You're
nice
a
thing
FOSSA nerd. FOSSA nerd.
Just Sorry, did I not mention the Mad 5M Marauder variant in the title? Um, although it's been a long time because it's a really, really, really expensive habit. But the one nice thing, it's free to play. However, it's not free to play in the way that we've been seeing a lot of the other free to play games go. You're not buying golden bullets. What you're doing is repairing mechs quicker or making your mechs look fancier. And as far as
can you
the
give it a
launch
hat?
date, essentially, or a paint or a skulls, whatever you want.
Top hat.
But they're not saying only if you're giving us a couple of bucks can you get this weapon or that weapon or the other weapon. Of course, this may change over time, but for now, we're going to have a nice little Mech Warrior game to go out and just blow the snot out of people. And as a new little add-in, the shoulder-mounted weapons and the arm-mounted weapons are now separately aimable. Be interesting to see how they implement that.
Now, I know you're not a console person, probably not a Kinect fan, Jeremy. Have you heard about or seen anything about the new Steel Battalion game that is being developed for the Kinect?
Well, I've seen about it. I haven't read.
It's
that
kind of
much
like
about it.
it. In my mind, Mech and the Steel Battalion stuff are very similar, and so they were talking about how you use the Kinect to reach out and move dials and knobs inside this tank. It's much more steampunk than like futuristic mechs, but the interaction methods that Steel Battalion has using the Kinect, and they, it's possible for them to bring this to the PC as well. The Kinect.
So,
to the PC
so you're
itself.
turning knobs with Kinect.
Turning knobs.
I can see a lot of abuse in the future.
Flipping switches. Yeah,
So
exactly.
we've got our 10-finger touchscreen application.
Oh goodness. So yes, turning knobs, twisting dials, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for ruining that.
Also brought to you by the Plumbing Simulator.
So that's good. That's actually going to round up the news for this week. We're going to get into our hardware and software picks, kind of in line with my NCAA bracket competition, which I wanted to give a shout out to a good friend of ours at the show, Rep Soul Gamma, who's listening live right now, who thanks PC Per for drawing him into the world of brackets. Never would have done it without a little competition and a little prize on the line. But there you go. It's all about getting people involved and fun and all that kind of stuff. But in relation to all that, my pick is actually the NCAA March Madness live application that's available on your PC, your Mac. It's actually just websites on there, and then your iPad, iPhone, and then some Android devices as well. That lets you, for $3.99, have live access to all 67 games of the NCAA tournament wherever you are. So I actually think that's relatively cheap, especially if you compare that to things like I was going to say on demand, but pay-per-view services, like to get the SEC tournament, for example, at our house, to get the full SEC tournament, the games that aren't nationally broadcast. We're only talking about, like 12 games, 14 games for that. Our cable company wanted like $65. So to get the entire NCAA tournament, you're paying $3.99, and you have access to on all kinds of devices. And like we were watching the one here earlier today at the office, just on the PC, so you can just log in the website, use it there. I think very worth the money for you there. So that is my pick. Yeah, Jeremy, what do you got?
Well, for those of you that want to spend a little less money but still want to just have beer lying around the house, home brewing has been a big industry for a long time, but only recently has automation and computation been brought into it. So there's a nice little Linux program called BrewTarget, which is a little open source community, about 51,000 some downloads. They all share recipes, and nicely, it will also do a lot of the calculations for you. So the weight of your yeast, your specific gravity. It's going to do a lot of the calculations as to what exactly is going on in that carboy that you're brewing beer in. It won't clean them for you, and that, frankly, is the most important thing, is to clean everything completely sanitary, or else it's going to you're going to have a whole bunch of funky tasting beer, which your friends are not going to like you for afterwards.
Just send it to Josh.
He won't like you either. But you make yourself.
I drank my fair share of home brewy funky beer.
Yeah,
you don't waste.
You want to do it right?
Just don't.
Yeah, no, well, you can't. It's illegal, I think. But hey, if you want some good recipes, you want a little bit of help trying to figure out exactly what's going on as you're fermenting, this is, hey, by far one of the best things that I've seen in a long time for home brewers. So don't stick yourself with a couple of gallons of beer you really don't want to drink until the eighth one.
All right, Josh, you are up next.
Me, you know, I kind of wish I was Al in ways, at least maybe as skinny. All right, maybe not that skinny, but he's got all kinds of SSDs and I don't. I probably have more STDs than him, but we don't want to really go there.
It's very similar. Don't mix those up when you're talking
No, not at all.
to your boss or lady friend. Yeah.
I saw a deal today and I couldn't resist. It was the OCZ Agility 3 256 gig drive, 240 gig. It's got the SandForce 2 controller, $287.99.
Before
and
any
you get a
rebate.
copy of Mass Effect 3 for free.
Really?
Have you
before
not
the rebate.
seen that?
No,
Give me
that's
after
actually
rebate
okay.
price.
That's actually I
That's
didn't know
a
you got Mass Effect
smoking
3 for
deal. It's a smoking deal. Unless, of course, you don't like BioWare and what they did with Mass Effect 3. But anyway, it's still a smoking deal.
I like this.
287. Ah.
Now, did you buy this already? You bought this.
I bought it.
So
There's a
how does the
$20
free
rebate.
copy of Mass Effect 3 come to you? Do you have to fill in a form and send it in before they send you a key, or did you get the key
No,
already?
they're actually sending me a copy of Mass Effect 3
On a disc?
Oh,
on a
They
disc.
still make
It's got
those?
its own shipping number on it, or it's it's going to be maybe a little certificate that I put into
Huh.
what Origin. But anyway, one way or the other, they are sending me something through UPS. It's a smoking deal for a good drive.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's $267 after the rebate.
Yeah. You get a $20 rebate.
267 for the rebate.
That's like almost a buck a gig. That's really
that's
close to
$30
a buck a gig.
more than I paid for mine. I'm sad. And I
Oh.
didn't get Mass Effect
No,
3.
I feel special. Huh?
Okay, Alan, take us home. Figuratively, not really.
For those that have been waiting or tinkering around by following Tim's excellent guide from a couple weeks back on Windows 8 Consumer Preview, the Windows 8 Server beta has come out. They didn't call it Consumer Preview or any of that silly nonsense. It's Windows Server 8, and it's the server operating system. You should try it around, play around with it in a VM. Don't be surprised if you end up seeing that version of it or some really stripped down version of that on NAS devices moving forward, because I just sort of see it coming, right? With the storage spaces thing, and it's already doing thin provisioning and all this other magical distributed parity, and drives can fail on the fly and you can just add drives on the fly, that sort of stuff. I really see that, ARM powered NAS sort of thing happening.
Is it
I
true
can
that
just
it
see
shipped without the GUI enabled?
It didn't ship that way. It gives you a choice during the install. I actually
okay.
installed it earlier today.
But it gives
does
you
the
that
same
choice.
The default is no GUI. and you have to
Imperial
pick-
versus
you have to
what,
pick,
Storm Riders or whatever they're called?
Yes.
Storm Crows?
But you select GUI. It's a little stripped down compared to Windows 8 Consumer Preview. It's the same way that server versus consumer stuff has been in the past, right? You get a stripped down version of the GUI. You don't get themes. You don't get any of that other stuff. Storage spaces, much more features, I guess, available specific to storage spaces. And granted, it's a server operating system, so you have like clustering options and all this other extra stuff in there. But it just sort of made me smile a little bit when it asked me how large I wanted my thin provisioned client to be, and I just typed 1 and a bunch of zeros, and then it told me this is 9,967 exabytes. Yes. Okay.
Compensating for something
I would
now?
almost
I
make
said-
jokes about that, your thin client and how large you want
Yeah.
it to be.
And how
Yeah.
many zeros you added at the end of that?
My thin client is huge.
Why do we have to take this?
Hey, I want everybody to know that Ken left us tonight. He just checked in at Steak and Shake. on
What?
Foursquare.
What the
You send him
No,
a
there's
text
a
message
date.
right now.
I'm
Let him know.
dining at the Steak and Shake.
Is it? But the good
Steak
news is
shake.
he unlocked the flame broiled badge for Foursquare. Cheeseburgers all around.
He's a framer.
Oh, yes.
Flaming, huh? Sweet.
Oh goodness! And I just learned Kentucky is opened as a 25-point favorite in its game tomorrow. So that's good news for me.
Ken text message now.
Yes, Ken,
Take-
send Ken text message. Tell him you want a milkshake
Oh,
to
you're
go.
a framer.
Well, she carries him in rather than them carrying it out.
All right. Somebody just sent me a tweet that said, "Surprise on tonight's PC Per podcast, you didn't even mention the release of Windows 8 Consumer Preview." Good thing.
What?
Podcast is not over, and he obviously tweeted this before we talked about Windows 8 Consumer Preview.
Wait a minute.
So-
but that was
Didn't we do
the
that
consumer-
last week?
And we
That
did,
was the
and we
last
did do
week or
that
the
last
week
week because
before?
we talked about the virtual machine thing too.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. Listen up, John. Pay attention
Yeah.
to all of our back episodes. Listen to them all over and over again. Actually, don't
Yeah,
do
John.
that. No, don't zoom in. All right, so that's it. We're going to round up the episode. Finally, if you want to get in touch with us, pcper.com/podcast is the URL to go to. It has all the details on how you can call us, email us, send Ken a message when he's at Steak and Shake. All of those are very important things. And then I really encourage everybody to find, however way you want to follow PC Perspective, how it's the easiest for you to get a hold of us or pay attention to what we're doing. If you use Twitter, twitter.com/PCPer. If you don't use Twitter but you prefer Facebook, you're on Facebook all the time like Alan, facebook.com/PCPer. You can friend, don't friend Facebook, friend PCPer, and then maybe you'll be able to be Alan's friend. Maybe.
Friend.
I'm not
Facebook.
saying it's
What,
gonna
that's the
happen.
Tom of Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you don't do Twitter or Facebook, you do Google Plus. Go to gplus.to/PCPer or search for PC Perspective on Google Plus. And if you don't do any of that, and all you do is look at almost pornography on YouTube all day, go to youtube.com/PCPer and you can get our almost pornography.
Almost.
Featuring
It's
Josh.
it has to be almost because it's on YouTube.
That
It's one of our
Josh,
real-
he's waxed.
So if you're on a real porn channel, I think it's like porntube.com/PCPer. Actually, don't go to that because I have no idea where that's going to take you.
Setting that
So,
up right now.
Yep.
all right. So with that, we'll wrap the
Keywords:
show.
mineral oil, intern.
No. We please we
Steak and Shake.
gotta stop that. Eventually the FBI is going to show up, and I don't want that on my record. Maybe I want to be a school teacher one day. Let's leave. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Alan Malventano.
Thanks for listening.